She ran from her abusive ex and ended up in the arms of the most desired millionaire in the country. But what seemed like a fairy tale turned into a nightmare inside the mansion itself. A deceitful housekeeper, a powerful father-in-law, and a cowardly plan to destroy her. None of it could stand against their love, but now Alhaji Williams had a new plan, darker, more lethal, a plan to erase Aisha without leaving a trace. Will he succeed? That's what you're about to find out. Aisha and Dio were living days of apparent peace. The garden blossomed with a symbolic intensity, jasmines blooming in the early morning, daisies swaying gently in the warm afternoons, and among the rose bushes carefully tended by Mama Ayo, the first red buds emerged like tiny beating hearts. Aisha's laughter echoed through the backyard, as if time had finally learned to be kind. Even Mama Ayo, who had lived for so long on alert, was once again sewing with joy. Her experienced fingers danced through the fabric as if whispering secrets to destiny, stitching threads of hope into the wedding dress that slowly took shape. On the porch, Dio would sometimes watch her in silence, arms crossed over his chest, face half hidden in the shadow of the eaves. His love for Aisha didn't need words. It lived in the way he prepared her bathwater, how he adjusted her pillow at night, how he noticed every little detail. Ever since he had pulled her from that bridge, he hadn't let her out of his sight for a moment longer than necessary. It was as if they had finally made it through the storm, but outside their paradise, something dark was crawling between the cracks. In the marble and glass penthouse that housed the Williams empire, Alhaji sat motionless for over an hour. The panoramic view of the city served only as a cold backdrop to his harsh expression. On the table, a thick envelope filled with notes and records from Aisha and Dio's daily life. Photos of them laughing at a picnic, videos of her picking flowers beside Mama Ayo, audio recordings of casual conversations, captured without permission. The old tycoon studied it all like a hunter, who, after missing the first shot, swore the next one would be precise. There was no room for failure now. She got away last time, but now it'll be slow, silent and final. The following week, he showed up at their house wearing a pale tunic, holding a modest bouquet, and wearing a carefully rehearsed expression. The gate opened without resistance. No one expected to see him again so soon, especially not with that face aged not by time but by the performance of regret. As he entered, silence gripped the room for a few seconds. Aisha held a teacup. Dio was reading a report on the couch. They both stood, surprise written across their faces, and he spoke, softly, with the tone of someone who had practiced that speech in the mirror more than once. I've come to ask forgiveness once again. I can't live with the weight of what I did, and if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your lives for real. No requests were made, no conditions, just sweet words, like honey. The hug he gave Aisha was light, calculated. The eyes, once cold, now pretended to be warm, and perhaps because of hope or the desperate need to believe, she accepted. Still wary, but she accepted, because in the heart of someone once betrayed, forgiveness isn't always a new beginning. Sometimes it's just a truce. From then on, Alhaji began visiting their home with unsettling frequency. At first on Fridays, then Wednesdays and Sundays too. He always came with a polite excuse: fresh fruit from the farm, rare African fabrics for the wedding trousseau, or wine that just fits a night of celebration. He said he wanted to know the woman who had won his son's heart, that he wished to be present before the wedding, that he had already wasted too much time on pride. Slowly, he slipped through the cracks like wind. He gained their trust with subtle compliments, long conversations at the table, harmless-sounding advice. Choose your rings carefully, they'll symbolize your bond. Or, they say the best weddings are the ones shaped by the bride. I know an excellent planner. Every suggestion carried a hidden motive, a new reason to get closer, to control more, to learn everything. He began attending meetings with decorators. He gave opinions on the guest list. He offered his personal drivers for Aisha's errands. She, increasingly uncomfortable, tried to step back, but Dio, overcome with a joy he'd never known, insisted, maybe this is the start of something new. My father is trying. And that's exactly when the plan began to work. This story is just getting started. If you want to find out how far Alhaji's plan will go and whether Aisha and Dio's love can survive what's coming, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. The pace at home had intensified since the official engagement. The once peaceful, Routine had been replaced by a whirlwind of ceremony preparations, unexpected visits from distant relatives, and doubled responsibilities at the company. In the middle of it all, Aisha insisted on keeping control, sweeping the floors before the sun was fully up, preparing elaborate dishes with her own hands, managing bills, reviewing contracts alongside Dio. Her love for the little things kept her going, but her body had begun to show signs her heart refused to admit. Fatigue shaped itself into light dark circles under her eyes, minor memory slips, faint spells she masked with a tired smile. One of those dragging mornings, while folding sheets with hands still trembling from the heat of the iron, Dio watched from a distance. It wasn't the first time he wondered how far devotion could go before turning into harm. He knew her effort came from a beautiful place, someone who had suffered too much, and now wanted to protect everything with her own hands. But there's a fine line between care and exhaustion, and Aisha crossed that line every day. Over breakfast, between spoonfuls of porridge and the clink of the teacup, he gently brought it up. "Love, I think it's time to hire someone to help you." Silence came first. Aisha, her gaze fixed on the window, left the spoon suspended in midair for a few seconds. The memory of the last maid still haunted her, someone she trusted, who betrayed her inside her own home. That wound stung deeper than any physical tiredness, but Dio's voice wasn't commanding. It was a careful whisper, offering shelter, not a demand. "You don't have to do it all alone, and we can choose someone together." Slowly, his words found a crack. She nodded hesitantly, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. There was a limit, and she was nearing it. The next afternoon, Alhaji Williams made his usual visit. He dressed with somber elegance, exuding rehearsed charm. He offered dried fruits, asked about the wedding menu, praised the garden, decorations. When he heard about the couple's decision, he smiled, a smile too polished to be genuine. "Coincidence or not," he said, "I know a young woman who's looking for work. She's from a traditional family in the countryside, very discreet. I could do you that favor." Aisha hesitated. Dio shot a warning glance at his father, but the old man pretended not to notice. His sweet tone didn't match the rush to solve everything. It was as if he had been waiting for that very opportunity. A few days later, on a seemingly ordinary morning, the new housemaid arrived. Adana, young, soft-featured, modest posture, her hair neatly braided, dressed in simple clothes, and carrying a small, dark leather bag. When she introduced herself, her eyes remained downcast and her voice was gentle, measured, almost musical. She claimed to be from a Sogbo, where she cared for an elderly woman, a distant relative of a friend of Alhaji's. She had experience with cooking, cleaning, and large households. Mama Ayo welcomed her like a granddaughter, and Aisha, despite her lingering fear, saw nothing wrong. The young woman's hands were steady, her voice unwavering, and her work flawless from day one. The rice was never mushy. The sheets smelled of fresh soap and sun. The windows were clean before noon. It was hard to find fault in someone so efficient, and yet something about this perfect routine felt too good to be true. At first, Adana kept discretion as her greatest strength. She didn't interfere in conversations, asked no questions, and moved around the house with the lightness of someone who already knew its corners. Dio watched with cautious eyes. The couple was even hopeful, believing this time everything would go well, but they had no idea what was coming. Alhaji Williams was in no rush. Silence was the favorite weapon of a man who learned to win without ever raising his voice. After his false apology, forced closeness, expensive gifts, and sweet words served with breakfast, all that remained was to let the new gear in his plan begin to spin. Everything had been meticulously calculated, from the tone of voice to the choice of the new maid. Adana, with her soft eyes and silent hands, wasn't placed there by chance. She had been selected like a rare chess piece in a game of war. The girl came from a village nearly forgotten on the map. She lived with a sick grandmother and 3 younger siblings. She worked wherever work was found, cleaned what needed, cleaning, and swallowed her hunger with the same silence she learned in childhood. When a respected, well-dressed man like Alhaji Williams offered a sum that could change her family's life, she didn't ask questions. She just listened. The proposal was simple. A few drops of a clear liquid in certain dishes, nothing more. She wouldn't need to hurt anyone, wouldn't raise suspicions, just follow instructions. And at the end, she could disappear with enough money to never go hungry again. The vial was delivered in a grey velvet box, complete with a dropper and handwritten instructions. 5 drops per meal once a day, preferably in warm food, never at the same hour, to avoid a pattern. Adana didn't question it. She hid the box in the false bottom of her bag and started her first day with a discreet smile. She quickly learned the household's habits, each person's tastes, Aisha's preference for light lunches and hibiscus tea in the afternoons. In the beginning, no one suspected anything. The new maid was attentive, efficient, kind. She knew when to be quiet and how to smile sweetly. When she dropped a jar on the second day, she was forgiven easily. When she made her first pumpkin ginger soup and Aisha complimented it, her eyes sparkled, not with pride but because she knew the plan was working. During the first week, symptoms came like soft knocks at the door. A bit of dizziness in the morning, sudden tiredness after lunch. Aisha, once full of energy, began to nap without realizing. She blamed it on sleepless nights, wedding stress, too much work. Dio urged her to rest more. Mama Ayo brewed herbal teas and prayed over her head, thinking it was spiritual fatigue. As days passed, Aisha's body began reacting more clearly. Her hands trembled when holding a spoon. Her eyes watered without cause. Her legs weakened after a few steps. One day, while watering the jasmine, she fainted. When she came to, she brushed it off. "Just the heat," she said. But deep inside, something screamed. This wasn't normal. Adana carried on with surgical precision. The poison, extracted from a rare but potent plant, left no trace in the blood after a few hours. Al-Haji had chosen well. He had used it before, in situations the world would never know. Now he watched his target crumble from within, silently, day by day. Dio tried to be present, foot massages at night, soups made with his own hands, forced laughter on quiet afternoons. "You need to stop trying to do everything alone," he'd say, trying to ease her burden. Aisha, always resilient, insisted she was fine, but the memory lapses began. Sentences left unfinished, words mixed up. Once, she called Dio by another name. Another time, she lost her engagement ring and couldn't remember where. She cried alone in the bathroom, ashamed, scared. In his office, Al-Haji kept a close watch. He sent polite messages, asked about Aisha's health in a concerned tone, sent baskets of fruit to strengthen her. To outsiders, he was the ideal father-in-law. But between phone calls, he laughed to himself, sure that his new plan was flawless. She'll waste away slowly, and when she's too weak, he'll realize he chose wrong. The cruelest part was how time became an accomplice. The slow poisoning allowed room for doubt. No one rushed to the hospital over a memory slip. No test raised red flags. And the victim, confused and scared, began to doubt her own sanity. Aisha, in silence, started to wonder if her body was betraying her will to live, and slowly she began to withdraw. Fewer smiles, fewer outings, less light in her eyes. One rainy afternoon, while trying to finish reviewing a company document Dio had given her, the words blurred. The paper slipped from her hands. Her head dropped to her shoulder. Dio rushed to her, panicked. He called her name, but she was slow to respond. When she opened her eyes, she couldn't remember what she'd been reading. For the first time, Dio's eyes filled with real fear. Something's wrong, seriously wrong. And still, no one looked at Adana, because her disguise was made of silence, punctuality, and soft prayers before meals. Because villains sometimes wear clean aprons and serve honey-sweet tea at dusk. But everything that's hidden eventually comes to light. And maybe soon someone's eyes will begin to see what no one else dared to imagine. If you felt anger about what they're doing to Aisha, comment below. This is cowardice. Let's protect this story together. She deserves justice. The garden that once seemed to breathe with them had become a silent space. The breeze that made the wind chimes on the porch sing now carried, from time to time, a sense of unease. Aisha no longer had the strength to gather the fresh herbs she used to scatter across the kitchen. Adana, always helpful, insisted on taking over the meals, all while stealing discreet glances with each spoonful she served. Her calm face hid the precision with which she counted. Each drop, always 5, no more, no less. The colorless liquid slid among the ingredients as if it were part of the recipe, and with every new meal, Aisha unknowingly said goodbye to another piece of herself. Mornings became a burden. Aisha, once the first to rise, humming as she arranged the flowers in the living room, now took longer to get out of bed. When she managed to, her steps were slow. Her hands trembled for no reason. Sometimes she forgot where she had left simple objects, a cloth, a spoon, even her phone. At first, she blamed the intense routine, the overwhelming responsibilities. After all, she had always insisted on not depending on house staff, but something inside her wasn't responding the same way, as if she were being emptied slowly without visible wounds. Dio urged her to rest. He served fresh juices, ginger tea, and checked on her every 2 hours. When he noticed her blank stare in the middle of a sentence, his heart sank. One night, he found Aisha sitting on the hallway floor, teary-eyed, holding a dress she had sewn with Mama Ayo for the engagement. She didn't know how long she'd been there. "I think I fell asleep," she whispered. But her body was awake. It was her clarity that was slipping away. Doctor visits became frequent. First a general practitioner, then a neurologist. Tests, and more tests. Everything came back normal. No issues with the kidneys, no abnormalities in the blood, nothing in the lungs. It might be post-traumatic stress. She's been through a lot. The explanation sounded plausible, but it wasn't enough. It didn't account for the blackouts, the memory lapses, the loss of strength in her legs. Each appointment brought more frustration. Worse yet, they started to suggest the symptoms might be psychosomatic, a reflection of the mind, not the body. Mama Ayo watched everything from a distance. She wasn't one to make a fuss, but her wise, attentive gaze saw what others couldn't. Adana, for example, always helpful, always in the right place, always with that sweet smile, but something about her presence didn't sit right. A strange scent, a way of getting too close, of eavesdropping from a distance. Sometimes she stared too intensely at Aisha while she ate, as if she were waiting for something. The old matriarch began to suspect. But suspect what exactly? One afternoon, while embroidering under the shade of the porch, she overheard Adana on the phone near the outdoor kitchen. She couldn't make out the words, but the girl's voice was different, cold, objective. When Adana noticed she was being watched, she smiled and ended the call quickly. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. Meanwhile, Alhaji Williams remained in his role as the cordial patriarch. He visited the couple often, brought seasonal fruits, gifted poetry books. He always asked if Aisha needed anything, if she was comfortable. Sometimes he even faked concern for her health. Maybe it's anemia, he'd suggest with a calm tone, but inside he laughed. The plan was working perfectly. The physical poison did its part, but it was the doubt he most enjoyed planting. A love that doubted itself was easier to destroy than any direct attack. Days grew heavier. Aisha began to avoid leaving the bedroom. Light irritated her. Sounds felt like needles in her ears. She slept at odd hours, broke into cold sweats for no reason, and woke with chills even under thick blankets. Her mind could no longer grasp reality clearly, and still she forced herself to rise, to make breakfast, to smile at Adana, who served her plate with the same rehearsed sweetness. No one saw it, no one heard it. But in her silence, Aisha had begun to distrust her own body. One Sunday, while trying to write a shopping list, Aisha realized she couldn't form complete sentences. She wrote 3 words and forgot the 4th. The paper slipped from her hands. The jumbled letters seemed to mock her intelligence. She cried quietly, curled on the couch. Dio found her minutes later, head bowed, breathing uneven. "I can't think straight anymore, Dio. Something's wrong with me. Really wrong." Her voice trembled, almost childlike. That very night, Dio took her to the hospital. He demanded new tests, a different medical team, but again the results pointed to severe stress. "Is she having an emotional breakdown?" asked a nurse. That was the first time Aisha screamed in desperation. "I'm not crazy." The words echoed through the corridors, silencing everyone. The fear of losing herself was more terrifying than any diagnosis. Back home, Adana was waiting with a bowl of soup already served, smiling as always. Aisha hesitated for a few seconds. Something inside her wanted to say no, but her body was too weak to argue. She took a few spoonfuls, then lay her head on Dio's lap, trying to convince herself it would pass. Meanwhile, Alhaji Williams toasted silently with a Nigerian diplomat in his office. "Force is unnecessary when you have patience. She'll collapse from the inside, and the best part, it'll look like it was her choice. And what if it's already too late when the truth is discovered? Will someone finally connect the dots before the total collapse?" Comment below. Stay strong, Aisha. Let's protect this story together. She deserves justice. The afternoon fell with a strange stillness, as if time itself sensed something different was about to unfold. The sun had already sunk behind the trees, painting the sky. in pale orange hues. The house remained quiet, except for the gentle rustling of wind brushing the windows. Aisha had been asleep since noon, exhausted after yet another dizzy spell. Her body no longer felt like her own. Outside her bedroom door, Mama Ayo stood, holding a steaming clay bowl in her hands. She hadn't called anyone, not Adana, not Dio. She had cooked in silence, using roots she had known since childhood. Yam, bitter leaves from the backyard, a touch of ginger grated on stone. While chopping the ingredients, she whispered in Yoruba, "May the strength of the earth reveal what the eyes cannot see." There was something about that day that refused to let her ignore her intuition, and even without proof, her ancestral instinct screamed from within. As she entered the room, Adana suddenly appeared in the hallway, holding a tray with white rice and light sauce. "I already prepared her meal, ma'am," she said, with the sweet smile she used as a shield, but the gesture was stopped by a single look from Mama Ayo, the kind of look that needed no words. Silent, firm, unshakable. The young woman froze for a second, then stepped back into the hallway with small, controlled steps. Aisha woke to the aroma of yam. It was simple, but comforting. "I made it myself," the old woman murmured, sitting beside the bed. "Just eat a little." Without knowing why, Aisha trusted her. She picked up the spoon, blew gently, and took a bite. For the first time in days, the food didn't make her nauseous. No tremors, no strange emptiness in her chest. She ate slowly while her fragile body received the meal like one would receive shelter. Mama Ayo's gaze never left her, and as she watched her daughter-in-law place the empty bowl aside with a relieved sigh, something inside her was confirmed. That night, when the rest of the house was asleep, the matriarch walked to the small altar set up in the corner of her room. It was simple: 3 candles, a cloth embroidered with protective symbols, a clay bowl with water and sacred leaves. She sat before the center candle, lit it with trembling hands, and closed her eyes. "There is a curse in this house again, but this time, I won't close my eyes." Her voice came out low, but full of power, not from her throat, but from her soul. And like a seed planted in the earth, that silent prayer began to sprout. In the following days, the sick routine continued. Aisha felt worse every time she ate a dish prepared by Adana. But a tea brewed by Mama Ayo, or a meal made by Aisha herself, brought momentary relief. The old woman watched every detail with surgical precision: times, ingredients, reactions. While the rest of the house lived in a fog of doubt, she moved toward the truth with the resolve of someone who had faced darkness before. Until one muggy night, with the house swallowed by silence and frogs croaking in the distance, she got up. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. She walked down the hallway, slowly, as if trying not to awaken fate. In the kitchen, Adana's cabinet door was slightly ajar. She rummaged through folded cloths, rice packages, jars with faded labels. Almost nothing stood out. Almost. In one corner, between 2 dark cloths, she found a small glass vial. Its cork lid was loosely sealed. The liquid inside was translucent, nearly invisible. The label had been torn off, leaving just part of a word in Old Yoruba, Oro, which could mean poison, word, or even secret, depending on the tone. Mama Ayo held the vial against the dim kitchen light and murmured, "There you are." The next morning, before the sun reached the treetops, she left the house quietly. She carried the vial wrapped in embroidered cloth, hidden inside a fruit basket, a disguise for curious eyes. She walked to the home of an old acquaintance, Tunde, a healer known for his quiet words and hands marked by time. She didn't need to explain much. At the sight of the vial, Tunde simply nodded and disappeared into his analysis shed. Hours later, he returned with narrowed eyes and a voice weighed by truth. "It's not deadly poison, but it weakens, eats away slowly. First the body, then the mind, memory, clarity. In the long run, it can kill in silence and leave no trace." The old woman's heart clenched, her hands tightened into fists on her lap. Her dry throat took seconds to find a voice. "So, that's what that old demon is plotting." She didn't need to say his name. They both knew. The patriarch, the manipulator, the same one who had tried to destroy Aisha before, now with a more elegant tactic. Silent, almost perfect. On her way home, the sky was already dark. Heavy clouds warned of rain. But what weighed heavier was the truth in her chest. She walked through the front door as if unaware of anything, but her eyes no longer lied. She knew she was in a battlefield, and the enemy lived under the same roof. Whether this battle would be spiritual, silent, or strategic, she didn't yet know. But one thing was certain: she would not let Aisha die slowly before her eyes, and she wouldn't allow Dio to be deceived once again by his own blood. Because some enemies don't strike from the front, they prefer to smile in the living room while spreading death from the kitchen. And the next step must be calculated with precision. If you believe true love must be protected even inside your own home, leave a like now. That shows you're rooting for Aisha, and that, like Mama Ayo, you never close your eyes to evil disguised as kindness. The day began strangely. A heavy silence hovered over the house, as if the very air knew what was about to happen. Mama Ayo had spent the entire night sitting at Aisha's bedside, watching every breath, every twitch. The poison no longer flowed through her body with the same intensity, but its marks were still there, in the weariness of her gaze, the pale tone of her skin, the slight tremble in her hands as she tried to hold a cup. When Dio entered the room, he saw them in silence. He looked at the woman he loved and knew it was time to act. Later that humid morning, Mama Ayo handed Dio the small vial she had found. With a steady voice, she told him everything. How she had suspected Adana, how she prepared a meal herself to be sure, how her blood turned cold when Aisha finally ate without getting sick. She showed him the secretly written notes, the times, the symptoms, the patterns, and finally, she revealed what the healer had said, that the liquid, though subtle, was a cruel weapon, capable of disorienting, weakening, and slowly dimming a person's inner light. Dio didn't hesitate. He climbed the stairs to his father's office with fire in his eyes and heavy footsteps. The man he had once respected now looked like nothing more than a cold enemy, disguised as a protector. As he entered, he threw the vial onto the desk, the clink of the glass echoing like a sentence. "If she dies, I swear I'll bury you with my own hands." Al-Haji didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned back in his chair, met his son's gaze with that familiar air of superiority, and said, "That woman will ruin your life. I'm just protecting you from disgrace." Nothing more needed to be said. In that moment, Dio understood there was no remorse in his father's heart, that all the theater of forgiveness had been just that, performance, a ploy to stay in control under the mask of repentance. What followed was silent but decisive. Actions. He contacted a trusted police inspector, arranged for the collection of evidence, and told Mama Ayo, "Now we protect Aisha for real, with justice." In the early hours of the next morning, Adana tried to flee. Her bag was packed, hair tied back, eyes alert. But as she crossed the side gate, she was intercepted by two undercover agents. She tried to resist, but there was nowhere left to run. During questioning, she broke. She confessed everything, from the day Al-Haji hired her to the measured drops and the promises of a new life abroad. She cried, but there was no remorse in her eyes, only fear. The tycoon's name hit the headlines like a bomb. Business magnate implicated in poison plot against daughter-in-law. Al-Haji tried to flee, of course. Used to escaping scandals with money and influence, he thought this would be just another storm he could buy his way out of. But while attempting to cross a narrow road outside Kaduna, he lost control of the car. Rain made the asphalt slick. The vehicle skidded, flipped, and plunged into a ravine. Moments later, it exploded in flames. No body was found, just the wreckage and a partially burnt wallet. Some said it was divine justice. Others believed he might still be alive. But for Aisha and Dio, it meant only one thing: freedom. Aisha's recovery wasn't quick. For weeks, she suffered memory lapses, dizzy spells, and headaches. There were nights she awoke, not knowing where she was. She cried in confusion, calming only. When she felt Dio's warm hand holding hers, he never left her side. He learned to brew the calming teas Mama Ayo suggested. He learned to recognize the good days and the hard ones. Their love was no longer made of promises, but of small daily gestures. One morning, Aisha looked at herself in the mirror and was surprised by her reflection. The dark circles had faded slightly. The light was returning to her eyes. And in that moment, she remembered the first time Dio had seen her. At that market, sweaty, tired, but with eyes full of resistance. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that rises from within. The pain was still there, but it no longer ruled everything. At sunset, Dio took her for a walk in the garden. The flowers bloomed. The scent of jasmine filled the air. The sky painted the clouds in shades of orange and pink. Aisha sat on the same bench where, months ago, He had promised her a new beginning, and there, without any grand speeches, Dio knelt again. He pulled a small box from his pocket, revealing a simple ring, one that held the meaning of everything they had survived. He looked into her eyes and asked, "Do you still want to marry me, even after all of this?" Her answer came slowly, her eyes full of tears. She took his hand and whispered, "Now more than ever." The wedding was simple, but unforgettable. No golden columns, no famous guests, only people who mattered. Mama Ayo led the ceremony, wearing a white scarf and hiding tears behind her calm smile. The decorations came from their own garden. The music was played on drums and sung in traditional chants. When Aisha walked in, wearing a light dress and a veil embroidered by hand, Dio's eyes gleamed as they had the first time. There was no poison, no doubt, no shadow, only love. Love that had survived fear, death, and power. At the end of the ceremony, under the starlit sky and the sound of laughter, Aisha looked out at the horizon and said, "Now we're free." And for the first time, in a long while, they truly were. Real love isn't perfect, but it's the only kind that survives chaos. If you believe every new beginning starts with a single act of courage, leave a comment. I still believe in love. And don't forget to watch the entire story from the beginning. Click the screen and watch now.